What's up, Shred Sexies? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. Got the call on the bad phone, basically through Facebook, asking me to clarify on this root note with a triad or dominant 7 chord. But minus the piano, just go through strictly the theory as I kind of understand it and try to make it as simplified and stripped down as humanly possible. So, no more ado. Let's get into it. Basically, we're talking about diatonic scales, okay? Scales that have 7 notes. And when you put all 7 together, you get an octave, right? When I go from one note all the way back to the same note again, I get 1 octave. Doesn't matter if I start on 1 and go all the way back to 1, or if I start on 5 and then go through the entire sequence again and get back to 5. That is still considered 1 octave, okay? And then when you're talking about chord theory, you have to start extending out because of the way that we do this theory, if you will, to 2 octaves. So now I'm going to have 2 consecutive series, okay, repeated twice in a row of these notes, right? 14 now. Because what I want to do here is usually have the scale degrees, right? We have this because effectively there are 12 keys. Excuse me, but they all obey the exact same rules. So you don't need to remember 12 sets of rules. You just need to remember 1 set of rules and then apply it to all 12 keys. And once you do it in 1 key, it's pretty self-explanatory. You'll just get good at the other ones too, okay? And you use systems like caged and 3 notes per string and all the rest of that stuff to basically cut down on the memory work. But the point being here is that's why we have scale degrees, is because essentially when we're talking about a diatonic major scale, you have 7 notes in the sequence, and when I want to build chords, I'm going to take every other note in that sequence, okay? Now, in this case, I'm starting on the 1, but if I was doing it 2, it'd be 2 and 4 and 6. Every other note for 3 or 4. Then it'd be, of course, the 1 again, right? 2, 4, 6, and then 1. And then the next one would be 3, 5, 7, 2. You see what I mean? I'm still going every other note in the scale. And of course, to avoid that confusion, we have what I call extension notes. And that's where we extend this 1 octave to 2 octaves. Now, essentially, the 1 and the 8 are the same note, and the 2 and the 10 are the same note. So when I subtract those out of this sequence, I'm left with these extension notes in the 2nd octave, which are the 9, the 11, and the 13. And you've probably heard that. So now we have the 1, the 3, the 5, right? And that can just be 1, 3, 5. Then it can be 1, 3, 5, 7. Then, of course, 1, 3, 5, 7 with the 9. Then with the 9 and the 11, or just the 11. And then the 13, or any combination thereof. You can do 1, 3, 5, 13. You can do 1, 3, 5, 9. There's no sort of like, oh no, you can't do that. Now listen, whether it sounds good or not depends on the inversion, and it depends on where you're playing it, but and if that's the best choice. But there are no rules, right? So I'm just throwing that out there. So realistically speaking, when you think about it, you have this C major scale, and of course I've just layered in these scale degrees next to it. So I'm going up the C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? All the way up the 1st octave there. And I've laid out all the scale degrees. But then, of course, by the time I'm getting back to the 2nd degree here, I don't call it the 2nd degree. Now I'm calling it the 9th. The D is the 9th. Now listen, there are sus chords where you get 1 and 2 and then 5, because you're suspending the 3rd, and you can get 1 with 4 and 5 now, okay? So those are both sus 2 and sus 4 chords, but I'm talking strictly triad theory here, okay? That's another kind of like little variation. We'll maybe talk about it later, but it's just another variation of this, okay? So it's 1, 2, 5 or 1, 4, 5 instead of 1, 3, 5. So they took this and they started messing with it, and they're like, oh, that sounds good. And you can do it with minors too, a sus minor chord or something, but it might be in harmonic to something else. So that means the exact same chord. So we don't use certain terminology. That's why I'm going to keep this pretty straightforward. So I'm left with these 2 really sort of major pieces of information, that to build chords, triads, dominant 7s, and then these chords with their extensions, okay, effectively, all I have to do is go every other note in the scale, extract them, and then arrange them, right? And when I do them in oops, I went too far there. When I do them in groups of 3, right, I get triads. When I do them in groups of 4, I get dominant 7. And I can start using that. And when I do, I come up with a sequence of chords. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. And that's also the first degree, the second degree, third degree, fourth degree, fifth degree, sixth degree, seventh degree, right? And then I can look at it in terms of the chord and alterations. There's the major chord. When I lower the third, there's the minor chord. When I lower the third and the fifth, there's the diminished chord. Okay, so it's all variations of this major chord right here. And when I kick it up to 4 notes, 1, 3, 5, 7 here, right, this variant, the dominant 7, I get major 7, minor 7, and I get a new chord here at the 5th degree to dominant 7. Whoops, my highlighting sucks. And then, of course, I also get a new variant of the diminished minor 7 flat 5, or half diminished, however you want to call that. I call it minor 7 flat 5 because I'm lazy, even though it's way more to say. Yeah, confusion. The thing here is that these two sequences basically line up, right? So instead of just having this major triad now, you just basically start substituting in as common knowledge that that's now going to be the dominant 7 position, this new chord that is developed by doing 4 notes in a row. And of course, you can take the root construction, the major 7, make alterations to get the dominant 7 there with the lowered 7th, then another alteration to get the minor 7, and another alteration to get the, minor 7 flat 5. I think I swallowed a bug there. I don't know what happened. Anyways, root note plus a triad or dominant 7 chord was initially the sort of question. Explain it. Well, essentially, we need to take this basic theory here now and apply it to diatonic theory up here. Okay, just the 1 through 7 stuff, so that we can now use the extensions to sort of flesh out these chords. So I did a few examples here. Let's do number 1. Whoops. Essentially, we're talking about a C note as the bass note and then a G major triad over top of it, right? So basically, if I were thinking about that, these are the notes here. The C bass note, of course, and then the G major triad. Here's the G major scale. There's 1. Whoops, doesn't want to cooperate. No, there's 1, right? There's 3, and there's 5. Right, so then, of course, I plot that out. And then I look to see where the C is, and I'm like, oh, look, there it is. It's the 4th degree of this G major scale. That's the 11, right? According to our little, you know, table up here. I'm like, okay, that's the 4th degree. You can add 7. I know, shocker. And get the 11 too. A lot of people like that. I do too. So that might be food for thought, but there it is. And then, of course, I've got this G major add 11 as the new compound target chord that I've created, okay? From doing the root note and a triad or a dominant 7 chord, I'm sort of creating a target chord, a sound I want to create. And in this case, it's like a variant of the G major chord, where I'm adding in this 11th. Now, it's not G major 11 because I would need the 7 and the 9 in there as well to get G major 11, or at least the 7 in there, bare minimum, or combination thereof of these notes. Usually you take these big dense chords like that and you dumb them down to 4 notes, so it gets a little more tricky. But just for the theory's sake, I almost got it. We'll leave it there, right? So I'm just adding in this flavor. You might have heard of G major add 9. That's another big, or a C major add 9. That's even bigger. Right, so this stuff sort of is universal. Now I'm just adding in this 11 to sort of vary this G major sound to give it a little more tension, but maybe in just the right respect. If you're doing a keyboard line that is slightly different, stuff like this is what makes the difference between a killer sound and an absolutely bonkers, amazing sound. Okay, some stuff just playing it distorted sounds great. But if you throw in this 11 at one point, right before your transition to create tension, to move the music to the next point, that is the hallmark of a lot of really killer 80s metal, you know, like Rat and stuff like that. They're the masters of this. That principle is beautifully illustrated in Lay It Down. That all those movements that he kind of gets going to get the chords moving back and forth. Red Beach is another one. They're adding in these extensions here. And of course, understanding it like this helps not only to do more sophisticated chords and just practice them and stuff, but later on you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, see, I can do this, you know, this power chord here, basically an implied G major, and add in the 11 and it'll sound really cool. Then I can move to this new chord and it sounds even better, right? So the next one here, line 2. This is C over D major, right? So there's the bass note, D major's D, F sharp, A. So there's the notes of D major, the 1, the 3, and the 5, right? Again, the first note, the third note, and the fifth note of the scale. There's the 7th, C sharp. Okay, so I'm like, okay, there's the first, there's the third, there's the fifth, and C sharp. Okay, well, if I take C sharp and I lower it, musically speaking, musically speaking, I'm lowering the 7th. That's going to give me D7 because I get 1, 3, 5, flat 7, which is right here, which I know, of course, to be the dominant 7 variant. See that? I know this sequence of events is this chord. I know this one, where there's no alterations, is this one. I know this guy over here, with all of them, is this one. And so that's how you got to kind of, it's like a Rosetta Stone, you know what I mean? And you just work backwards. And then when I organize the notes, I'm like, this C major that I'm tacking on top of this D major chord, D, F sharp, A. There it is, D, F sharp, A. And then now instead of having the C as the bass note, just tack it on into this D major scale and be like, well, there it is right there. It's C sharp with respect to 7th degree. So if I take and lower it down to C, well, that's just going to give me a standard D7 flavor. Nails it. Number 3 here, A over E minor. Of course, there's the A bass note with the E minor now. Now listen, I'm going to show you a new thing here. This E minor, the full sequence would be, you take the E major scale, you lower the 3rd, you lower the 6th, and you lower the 7th to get the E minor scale, which is effectively G major in the 6th degree. If you understood that, you're amazing. So the trick here is that you can see it as G major. The key here, instead of E major, when you see it's E minor, you're like the relative minor, E minor's major key is G major. So instead of doing this conversion part, but normally you would do this in certain instances, so don't skip over it. Understand, to get E minor, I need E major first, and then I need to lower the 3rd. Okay, so if I took 1, G sharp, and B here, right here, I lower G down, I get E, G, B. Well, that's E minor from G major. Okay, so I know that might be a little weird, but love it. And of course, once I factor in this A here, I can see that with respect to the G major, you know what I mean? Or sorry, with the E here, right? It's going to be the 11, which is the 4th degree right here. So that's also why I like to sort of think of it this way, because you can see that this note here between the E major and the E minor is unchanged. And that's a good way to check your work, essentially. Make sure some of the other notes haven't moved. They should stay the same. So that right there is going to give you an E minor at 11. Again, I have this minor sequence based over here. Now listen, this is 1, 3, 5, and you're like, why isn't it 1 flat 3, 5? Because now I'm thinking it in terms here, the first note, the 3rd note, and the 5th note, right? And then I want to add on the 11, which is going to be this one here, the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Add 7 gives me the 11. A. Boom. So that's why I did the conversion from E major here over to E minor, which I knew was the relative minor of G major. Plot them all out, and then just basically do the calculation in respect to where the A falls in the E minor scale. And so I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 in terms of a minor scale instead of the major scale, right? And that's a whole nother thing, because of this conversion. In a minor scale, I have to lower the 3rd degree. That's why I get G instead of G sharp. And I have to lower the 6th and 7th degree, C sharp, D sharp, which is why you get G natural here, C natural, and D natural. That's another big one. I have to convert this major scale into its minor scale. Then I can extract those notes relative to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to figure out what the final chord is going to be. That one was tough. Woo! Sorry. 4 here. G plus D diminished. G is the bass note. B diminished. B, D, F, of course, coming from C major, 7th degree. There's the 7th, right? The next one's going to be the 2, D. And again, the next one's going to be 4, F. And that's my thing. I already knew that B diminished is the 7th degree of C major. So I was like, C major makes the most sense. And then rearrange that relative to G. And then I'm like, okay, well, G here, if I put that in the bass, boom, I get essentially a G7 chord, because now I can convert from this C major to G major, and G major, F is sharp right there. See? And in this case, I have the lowered 7th, which gives me G, B, D, and F. G7. Nails it. At the bottom here, we have D plus F major 7, throwing in a dominant 7 flavor here. So that's D plus this new chord with 4 notes in it, F, A, C, E, right? So clearly we're working in the key of F major, right? So there's F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. So I have 1, 3, 5 again, right? The F, A, C, 7, that's the 7th degree. And now, of course, adding in the 13. And in this case here, since I'm adding this this 7th degree here with the 13, I would probably consider that to be F major 13, although I'm sure there's people on the internet that would disagree with that. I think it has enough of the core constituent notes, but whether it would sound better with the 9 or 11 rather than the 7 is definitely debatable, right? So again, notice me rearranging things here so that I can get this chord here built as F as the 1st degree, because then I can sort of retroactively slide in this D bass note, right? To be like, oh, it's F major 13. Now, right now, you're probably like, there's no way I'm going to remember any of this theory kind of stuff with the notes. And I understand that. You got to just start with, like I said, the C major stuff here, this one. And really, that's a couple years worth of work right there. Just working through these ones, working to get these sort of chord sequences down to be able to do the conversions here. Okay, especially in relation to the caged material. And you'll do it again here with the dominant 7 stuff. And that's just with chords. Or if you're like, chords ain't my bag, baby, get on the arpeggios, same thing. And then, of course, the important thing here is after you've done this part, there should be a serious part of you that's like, well, what's next? And that's where this comes in. And you should be basically aiming from the get-go to understand what it is that you're doing based around this simple idea, playing a root note and then layering some sort of chord or chords, plural, over top of it, or a chord with an extension note. And if you want to, you can kind of go through this process, and I'm sure eventually you'll just be able to see it on the fretboard and be like, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm hearing this sound. When I play the G major at 11, it has a sound. When I do the dominant 7, obviously, that has a very distinct sound. When I do this E minor at 11 or E minor 11 variant, it's got a sound. This has got a sound, you know what I mean? Same thing with this major 13, it's got a sound, and you'll start to catalog it as you get better at recognizing these sounds. And that's just it. You start off with the basic ones here, the kiddie pool ones, but they're actually a lot more sophisticated, right? And you literally master the sound of it, and then where it falls in the actual sequence, right? I think so many people don't understand that you have to be able to visualize these chords. I can hear these in my head as I'm doing this. As I hit on this bad boy here, I'm like, I hear that chord. I can hear what it does to it immediately, and then I can hear it again. And that's the part most people just do not understand. that this stuff up here, yeah, it's really important, but it's important to be like, it actually has some sort of physical, real world meaning when I'm actually playing sounds on my instrument, that this has some sort of relevance. It's not just this abstract piece of information. You're like, this is me taking that sound and basically breaking it down into its mathematical function, right? And then when I start messing with it, I can then figure it out for myself and be like, look at these notes and be like, if I just took this and put it at the bottom, well, all of a sudden I get this very simple G7 chord, and it's quite easy. You know what I mean? Most people will be like, there's no way. But after a few attempts, I think you'd be very surprised at what you can accomplish. And trust me, the amount of gains you make by doing things like this cannot be quantified. I'm telling you right now, it is the superior learning model. You can practice routines all you want, but it's basically taking this major scale situation and starting to factor in these chords and then sympathetic chords and then borrowed chords into the sequence in some sort of chord progression that's unique, that would be, that you come up with in the moment directly from your mind using these principles down here, where you're going to be like, oh, instead of playing F major, I'm going to play F major 13. It's not just, oh, here in this video, I'm going to play an F major 13. Put your fingers here and you do it too. And then 2 years later, somebody's like, maybe we should do a major 13 there. And you're like, remember that time? You know what I mean? So please just keep that in mind. Trust me, later on, you'll be like thanking me, because I wasted so much time without actually understanding this very simple principle, that there's this deep relationship to being able to be like, that's the sound of a major 13. That's the sound of a dominant 7 chord. And then kind of reverse engineer it so that I can understand the theory afterwards. So when I was writing my own music, I actually had tools to work with. Imagine if all you had to do was hold down one note and then play a series of triads underneath it and just started out doing it arbitrarily. And you're like, oh, that one sounds really good. Just imagine how much more interesting it would be and fun to play the guitar rather than just play through the regular Friday night thing. It's way more fun. And you're like, if I take those two and put them together, and then all of a sudden you have like this incredibly useful tool. So I'm going to leave the video there, and I hope it helps basically break down the scale idea first, just the sequence of notes, right? And the basic theory. Oh, we have to repeat over 2 octaves to be able to really dig in here, essentially, with this sort of chord theory and its extensions. That's why we have the 13. It comes from the fact that I'm stacking 2 octaves on top of each other to get 14 notes. Because if we do every other note in the scale, how do I ever get 2, 4, and 6? Well, they become 7, 11, and 13. You're like, oh, if I subtract 7, everything's awesome. Then the basic constructions of triads and dominant 7 chords, then their sequence with respect to, the scale degrees, right? That's where this comes in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right here. Whoops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now these chords here are basically making the variants, the diminished chord in minor, right? Because initially we just start off with the major here, 1, 3, 5, but once I start on 2, 4, and 6, I get a minor, right? And then when I go 3, 5, 7, I get another minor. When I go 4, 6, and 1, oh yeah, major. So I think you're getting the point here. Essentially, to get minor, I have to do this to this chord, and to get diminished, I have to do it again. And of course, I just kick it up a notch where I get the next level up. And then from there, I can now just play one of these notes as a bass note and play a triad built off any of the other ones. And then I can reverse engineer and be like, oh, that's a great sound. You know what I mean? And add another tool to your arsenal so that when you're practicing, you don't just play a G major open chord. You could quite literally play about 10 or 15 different variations to pick off every sort of conceivable, juicy element from the music as it's presenting itself. There it is. Done. We'll see you in the next one.